We're here at the National Postal Forum. I'm Jody Berenblatt from GrayHair Advisors. I've got a panel of experts on global mailing.
Marc Zazeela, APC Postal Logistics.
Marty Shaw with Global Z International.
Mary Law with WorldVu LLC.
And Barry Burns, Global Business, U.S. Postal Service.
So how is it that we capture the names and addresses of the people that we need to mail to, and what's the best way to do that?
Sure. So one of the most important things is to be flexible with your data capture. So it is going to change over time. WorldVu can certainly show with each of the publications that they release that countries are changing the format of their addresses.
One of the things that's really significant about international addresses is that they're longer than domestic addresses. You can't fit a British address into a US format, or a Japanese address into a US format. So you need to allow the extra space.
And not just the length. There are differences, of course, in the length of address between, say, Europe or other countries and the United States, but the formatting is different. So, for example, in the United States, where our zip code appears after the city and state,
Yes.
in many countries, the postcode, as it's usually called, often appears before the city, and maybe if there's a province, depending on the country, but it's before the city rather than after the city, which is what we're used to here in the United States.
Well, I think one of the mistakes that people make is assuming because they got an address on their website that the user created, and people assume that it's going to be correct. And what we see a lot of times, we're at the end of the chain preparing the mail for delivery, and very often people send us either lists to use, or they send us pre-addressed mail, parcels, and the addresses are invalid. Something's been left out, the person who wrote their address forgot something. It happens domestically also. It's the reason that you have address correction software and address update software for domestic. Surprisingly, people just don't really know their addresses as well as they should.
I find one of the common challenges we see with organizations which find themselves dealing with international data, either by design, they pursued it strategically, or they're seeing international customers come to them, is that there can be a marketing silo and a IT or IS silo, and both need to be at the table to design and assure that database is functional and works for the whole organization. So having them play nice, as it were, through the process is really important.
It's a process that has to go through from the data collection, through the data storage, into the print medium. You know, at some point, if you're mailing something, you're going to print that address out.
I often find working for the Postal Service when a customer may come to us and say, you know, we did a mailing and it took maybe longer than it should have, to be delivered. Now we know there are always factors such as, weather and, holiday times. I always ask about the address, and lots of people just assume that the address is correct and that it was formatted correctly and that it was actually printed on the mail piece correctly. You'd be surprised sometimes that there are just mechanical problems in the production of the mail piece.
I think, Barry, to your point, I think it really involves starting at the beginning of the chain rather than the end. People think of delivery problems as being at the end of the chain very often, and they come to us for that kind of information too. And when they'll tell us a package didn't get delivered or a mail piece was late,